There's a moment that most people do not notice. This moment does not happen when people are arguing. It does not happen when someone walks out the door. It happens quietly, invisibly, somewhere between another unanswered message and another night of pretending that everything is okay. The change is so small at first that even you do not realize it is happening. You still smile at people. You still listen to them. You still say, "I am fine," when people ask you how you are. Something deeper has already started changing inside you. Your nervous system begins remembering things that your heart keeps trying to forget. You stop feeling relaxed when your phone lights up with their name. You start preparing before conversations even begin. You replay changes in tone. Short replies suddenly feel heavy to you. Delayed affection feels dangerous to you. The strange part is that nobody around you sees the transformation happening in real time. They only notice it later when you become quieter than before. When you stop explaining yourself to people. When you stop chasing clarity from people who create confusion. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What he meant was simple but terrifying. The emotional patterns you ignore will eventually start controlling you from the shadows. That is exactly what happens to people who spend too long loving others without feeling emotionally safe themselves. At first you tell yourself that you are just tired, just stressed, emotionally overwhelmed from work, relationships, and modern life. Deep down your brain has already started connecting love with emotional uncertainty. You no longer walk into relationships with openness. You walk carefully, quietly, studying energy of trusting words. The terrifying thing about pain is not how loudly it arrives. It is how silently it rewires you. One disappointment rarely changes a person. Repeated emotional inconsistency does, especially when it comes from someone you trusted deeply. The human brain is designed to protect you from repeated pain. So eventually, after emotional whiplash, enough mixed signals, enough nights wondering why someone suddenly changed after making you feel safe, your mind begins adapting for survival instead of connection. And by the time people realize how distant you have become, they usually think you suddenly changed overnight. They never understand that your silence was built slowly, one wound at a time. The truth is that sensitive people rarely become cold without a reason. Most of the time, they become exhausted first. There's a kind of loneliness that comes from constantly being emotionally available for everyone while secretly feeling emotionally unseen yourself. It happens when you become the person everyone depends on emotionally. Nobody notices when you're quietly drowning. You answer late-night phone calls from people. You reassure people through their anxiety. You stay patient during chaos. You forgive things that hurt you because you understand trauma, stress, insecurity, and fear. You convince yourself that understanding someone is the thing as being loved by them. Eventually, your body begins paying the price for emotional overgiving. Your sleep changes. Your anxiety increases. Small emotional shifts suddenly affect you deeply. You overthink conversations while driving home from work. You reread text messages searching for clarity. You feel emotionally drained after spending time with people who only take from you psychologically. The painful part is that you keep trying harder because emotionally aware people often believe that effort can repair emotional imbalance. They believe that more patience will finally create consistency. More love will finally create security. More understanding will finally make someone emotionally responsible. The nervous system does not measure intentions. It measures patterns. That is why repeated disappointment changes people deeply. The brain stops focusing on promises and starts tracking prediction. It begins asking questions in the background. Will this happen again? Can I relax around this person? Am I emotionally safe here? Sigmund Freud believed that unexpressed emotions never die. They are buried alive, return later in uglier ways. You can see that everywhere in modern relationships now. People carry emotional pain into new connections while pretending they are healed because they still know how to smile, flirt, work, and function socially. Emotionally, they are operating from survival mode. They become hyper-aware of inconsistency. They notice when energy changes. They notice withdrawal immediately because their nervous system has learned that small shifts often predict larger pain later. This is why some people suddenly stop reacting after being hurt too many times. It is not because they stopped caring. It is because caring started feeling dangerous. Their brain learned that emotional attachment without safety creates instability. Eventually, even the most loving person reaches a point where self-protection becomes stronger than emotional hope. What makes this transformation more powerful is that it follows predictable psychological patterns that most people never understand until they experience them personally. The first pattern is conditioning. The brain learns through repetition. If closeness repeatedly leads to confusion, disappointment, abandonment, or emotional neglect, your nervous system slowly starts associating intimacy with danger of comfort. This is why someone who once loved deeply can suddenly become emotionally cautious without wanting to. Their body remembers pain before their conscious mind fully processes it. The second pattern is reward prediction error, something neuroscientists talk about often when studying attachment. Your brain expects reward from affection, reassurance, consistency, and connection. When the emotional reward becomes unpredictable, when someone gives intense affection 1 week and emotional distance, the next your brain enters a constant state of uncertainty. Uncertainty is exhausting. It keeps the system alert. You begin craving validation while simultaneously fearing disappointment. That is why toxic emotional dynamics become addictive. Your brain keeps chasing stability that never fully arrives. The third pattern is empathy. This is where the real transformation happens. Contrary to what people think, wounded individuals rarely stop feeling deeply. They simply stop giving emotional access to everyone. They begin studying behavior carefully. They stop trusting emotional words unsupported by consistent action. They become emotionally observant of emotionally impulsive. This shift changes everything. Suddenly, they're no longer easy to manipulate through guilt, inconsistency, or emotional confusion. They stop over-explaining their boundaries. They stop trying to rescue people who continuously drain them psychologically. Alfred Adler once wrote that the only normal people are the ones you don't know well. In words, every person is carrying invisible emotional struggles beneath the surface. Emotionally exhausted people become experts at hiding theirs because they are used to prioritizing everyone else's emotions first. Over time, however, their silence changes meaning. At first, silence was pain. Later, it becomes observation. Then eventually it becomes discernment. They stop reacting because they understand that emotional reactions often give manipulative people power. Instead, they watch patterns calmly. They notice who only appears when they need validation. They notice who disappears during moments. They notice who apologizes with words but repeats behavior afterward. Once the brain starts prioritizing patterns over promises, emotional illusions begin collapsing very quickly. You can see this everywhere in Western life now, especially in cities where people are constantly surrounded by communication but starving emotionally underneath it. A woman in New York finishes a 12-hour workday, rides the subway home exhausted, and still checks her phone every minute hoping the person she cares about will finally respond with emotional consistency instead of another vague message that leaves her anxious all night. A man in London keeps telling himself that his relationship is fine because there are no fights, yet every conversation feels emotionally disconnected, mechanical, and emotionally cold in ways he cannot fully explain to friends. Someone in Toronto spends months available to a partner who only becomes affectionate when they sense distance forming. Someone in Los Angeles watches their situationship view Instagram stories within seconds. ignores emotionally vulnerable messages for hours. Slowly, people begin adapting emotionally to these modern relationship dynamics. They become hyper-independent, hyper-vigilant, emotionally self-contained. They joke about attachment issues online while secretly feeling terrified of closeness in real life. This is the hidden cost of constantly living inside emotionally inconsistent environments. The nervous system never fully relaxes. Even simple things become emotionally loaded. A short text message, a canceled plan, a colder tone during FaceTime, a sudden shift in energy after intimacy. People tell themselves that they are overthinking, but often their brain is simply recognizing patterns faster than their heart wants to accept them. This is why aware people eventually become emotionally strategic. They stop romanticizing potential and start evaluating consistency. They stop believing that chemistry alone can sustain health. They start understanding that peace matters more than intensity. That realization changes dating completely, because mature people no longer ask, "How strongly do I feel about this person?" They begin asking, "How does my nervous system feel around them?" That question changes everything. Around safe people, your body relaxes. You do not constantly analyze their tone. You do not fear abandonment every time they become busy. You do not feel emotionally punished. Modern psychology explains how people change in a surprising way. John Bowlby, who came up with attachment theory, said that people are born to want to feel safe by being close to others. When this closeness is not stable or consistent, our mind starts to protect itself. That is why people who used to love without any fear can become very guarded on. Their brain is just trying to survive the uncertainty. Brené Brown talks about being vulnerable, which means being open and honest about your feelings. She says that being vulnerable is not a sign of weakness. It is about being brave and taking risks. That is why people who have been hurt emotionally become very careful about who they let into their life. They know that not everyone deserves to be close to them. Viktor Frankl, who went through a lot of suffering, said that we have the power to choose how we react to things. He said, between something happening and how we react to it, there is a space, and in that space we can choose what to do. This is very important for people who have been hurt emotionally. They start to think before they react. They stop trying to make sense of people who were confusing. They stop chasing people who were not emotionally available. They start to pause and think carefully. Carl Rogers, a psychologist, said that people heal when they feel safe and accepted. When people feel accepted, they start to change in a way. That is why it is so rare to find people who make us feel emotionally safe. Many people talk to each other all the time. They do not really create a safe space for each other. They give attention, not consistently. They validate each other's feelings, not reliably. They show affection, but not in a way that's accountable. Our body can tell the difference. It gets affected by it. Neuroscience shows that when we are under stress for a long time, our brain changes. The part of the brain that deals with emotions becomes more sensitive. Our body starts to feel anxious and stressed. That is why being in a relationship that's emotionally exhausting can feel physically draining. Our body sees unpredictability as a threat. On the hand, when we are in a safe environment, our body relaxes. We breathe differently, we sleep better. Our mind stops looking for threats all the time. Eric Fromm said that love is not a feeling, it is an art that requires discipline, responsibility, and respect. Most people focus on the intensity of their emotions. They forget about being responsible. Real maturity is not about being dramatic. It is about being consistent, reliable, and emotionally steady. It is about making the other person feel safe, not confused. When someone understands this, they stop confusing chaos with passion. They stop thinking that anxiety is love. They stop romanticizing people who hurt them emotionally. At some point, people who are emotionally exhausted have a moment of change. They stop abandoning themselves to make others comfortable. They stop trying to get closure from people who do not understand them. They stop shrinking to maintain unstable relationships. This change can look cold to people who used to take advantage of them. But it is not bitterness, it is just their body and mind being intelligent. They start to take their time, they stop explaining themselves all the time. They protect their emotional energy. They're not being mean, they're just being smart. They develop boundaries, and boundaries change everything. They make people earn their trust of giving it away for free. The healed person becomes very hard to manipulate because they do not confuse guilt with love. They do not think that suffering is a sign of depth. They do not romanticize being chosen by people who are not available. Instead, they become very selective about who they give their energy to. They choose calm over confusion, presence over intensity, and consistency over promises. They understand that love is not enough if there is no safety. They can care about someone deeply. They also know that they need to protect themselves. They stop asking how to fix the relationship and start asking why they're fighting hard for something that hurts them. That question changes lives. Healing is not about becoming heartless. It is about learning to protect yourself. It is about knowing that your empathy and your nervous system deserve peace and consistency. When you finally believe that everything changes, you stop chasing people who trigger anxiety in you. You stop negotiating with neglect. You stop confusing unpredictability with passion. For the first time in a long time, your mind, body, and heart start working together instead of against each other.